Today is the January the 11th, 2017. Three-person panel, the Board of Building Regulation Examiners and Appeals. We are here to hear the appeal for Mr. Terry Wise to accept hours worked to get a license is what is written on the... So, regarding the agenda, anybody have any comments, amendments to the agenda? Good. Hearing no objections, agenda is approved. We get a roll call. I should have done that before the agenda, but...
No worries. Mr. Fradine,
Present.
Mr. Cowling,
Present.
and Mr. Sobolewski.
Present.
And for staff, Mr. Heil
Present.
and Mr. Gibson.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Do we need swearing in this one, or are these...
You do have to swear in.
Okay. Do we want to do that now as we enter into new business? I do not have...
Let me get it then.
I'm trying to think the last time we sat on a three-person panel. It's been over a year.
I've done it recently, but I don't remember doing the swearing thing. I'm glad you remember that. That's why you were the chair.
That's why you're the chair.
No.
All right. Mr. Wise, do you affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give in the matter before us is the truth?
Yes, I do.
So Dan, I'm going to need help on this because I do not know the process for the three-member panel versus the full board where we go back and forth and present and this and that. Is it the same process?
Basically, it's very same.
Okay, so then my understanding is who goes first? The muni goes first, then the appellant goes, and then the muni is to rebut?
He gives the rebuttal. The muni presents the case.
Okay.
We give Mr. Wise the opportunity to present his case, and then the muni gives theirs, and then he goes back to him.
Okay, so the first one is just a general overview.
Correct.
That you guys are just talking about in general, what this is about, and then we'll get into the specifics. Okay? Gary, are you doing that?
Okay. Yeah, generally, Mr. Wise has submitted a request to take the journeyman's test, and he submitted hours from his current employee, or excuse me, employer. And the position the municipality has is that the hours they submitted were gained unlawfully, so that they don't count toward the 8,000 hours that are required to sit for the journeyman test, because he was not properly licensed during that time.
Okay. All right, so then, any questions on the general overall?
What's the rules for the license? I mean, you wouldn't, there's got to be, it must be some sort of apprenticeship thing type of accreditation, because I'm a journeyman electrician, and I went through the IBW when I went, but there was a process for that. If you're not in the plumbers union or whatever the union is, then there's got to be a non-union version of that on how those hours are tracked. You don't have to be a journeyman. So what's that process?
Well, typically, normally you have to be in an accredited apprenticeship program, to obtain your apprentice card. This situation is a little unique because Mr. Wise did obtain a state journeyman license. Okay, but he never was licensed with the city. To get licensed with the city as a journeyman, you need to submit your hours. So we can assume that he went through the apprenticeship, or fulfilled the apprenticeship requirements. Otherwise he wouldn't have gotten his state license. Okay, they have to submit hours, and I'm not certain what Mr. Wise submitted to the state. Typically, you just fill out an affidavit with some paperwork. They don't do any vetting at all, and we do. And so, and quite often we found that people that have obtained their licenses with the state did not have the qualifications after he was not able to, the hours that were provided by his employer, like I mentioned, were hours that he gained not being licensed with the city. So he already had his apprenticeship, so he just needed some hours, the hours that were legal, in our mind, legal hours, properly licensed within the jurisdiction to count toward the 8,000 hours that he needs to sit for the municipal test. And to the best of my knowledge, that hasn't been provided. I'm not certain, and he could tell us more, what he submitted or what he has. I don't know everything that you have, Terry, to be honest, so. And we have no record of anything in our system that he was licensed. Our licensing clerk said that he had an apprentice trainee card at one time, but he let it go. And I don't know what year that was. But we don't have record of that because after a certain time it just kind of goes away. The hard files we have, they throw them away every 3 years.
Well, why don't we, do that, just for a general overall?
Yeah, general, I still don't really get the process. It sounds like it's a little bit vague.
Well, I have some information, but if you guys would like to have it, that out of our administrative code, out of the paperwork that registration form, and it kind of states what's required to be able to be qualified to sit for the test. Well, and it's kind of throughout the different admin codes, several different sections there that are applicable, to this specific issue.
I honestly didn't know that there was a city license besides a state license,
There is for plumbers.
just plumbers.
Yeah, and then sheet metal as well, the city sheet metal license. The state doesn't require sheet metal, but the city does. I know that electricians, they just need electrical fitness, fitness
the
card,
state.
but not a city, yeah.
Yeah, and that's through the state, because
Right. Mhm.
I did the test. They accepted my hours from the IBW, and then that was it.
Yeah,
So, but it doesn't sound like it works that way at all for the, sounds like it's almost like a separate process.
it is. Yeah.
So if he was a journeyman and came up from Florida and wanted to work in the city, he'd have to work another 8,000 hours?
No, he would just have to provide documentation from, on notarized letterhead from his employers in Florida of the hours that he worked. And maybe, some type of, and we call them and we'll check into it to make certain, and if he had any licenses at the time, he would have to do that as well. So, there may be, he may have submitted those hours to the state, when he got a state license, and he may not have those anymore, and my understanding is those companies are out of business, but, if he were able to produce those to us, then we could count those hours. So he just hasn't really provided us anything other than the one document from Bowman Mechanical from 2009, which are hours that were accumulated while he was not licensed within the city. So technically he was working illegally within the municipality for all those years.
Gotcha. But even though he might have a journeyman's license with the state?
Yeah, we have specific language that states that we don't accept the state fitness card as proof of hours. It's in writing, yeah. Just
Okay.
because we've had several cases when, after doing a little bit of research and making some phone calls, we found that, and I'm not speaking to Mr. Wise at all, but there have been people that have actually falsified, they sign the affidavit with the state, and they're just saying that, yeah, I have these hours. They don't necessarily follow through and verify that.
So is what you're saying
It's
is
an honor
that
system.
if he came to Florida, you would accept that Florida says he's a journeyman, but he still has to provide all the hour backup
Yes.
again?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
I gotcha.
And we've
So
been very
now-
consistent in applying that to maintain the integrity of the program.
Gotcha.
We just want to make it fair for everybody, kind of much like, I guess, PE, that has to get their EIT and have, just the documentation. That's all we're looking for.
And there's probably other ways to back up these hours? Could you have W-2s or the signature of the journeyman, not the company that he
Yeah, I
worked
mean,
with?
I think they're open-minded in that respect. If we find people that own their own business, all their hours were owning their business, and that's hard. We'll look at, their, business licenses, whatever they can provide, to try to make certain that they have those hours.
Okay. All right.
Just listen to you guys, I am from Florida. I come up in '01, went back down in June of '02 and came back up in '05. And when I come back up in '05 is when I started to work for Partouche Plumbing. And I did get an apprenticeship card, both state and muni. But immediately started the process of, getting my paperwork together to prove my hours. And I did have 2 letters, one for the muni and one for the state, but I misplaced the one I had for the muni. And this was back in '05. So I did go ahead and get the state journeyman's license. When it came time to renew my apprentice card for the muni, they wouldn't let me renew it because I had a journeyman's card with the state. So I went and I talked to my boss at the time, Mike Cook at Partouche Plumbing. And he said, well, you don't really need a muni card anyway, you're just doing trim work. And so my understanding at that point was, not doing any roughing work, new construction type stuff, it wasn't a requirement. I may be wrong, but that was my understanding. So I went on working with them. I worked for them for 4 years, and in '09 I went to work for Bowman Mechanical after being laid off year after year with Partouche. The last time I finally said, okay, I'll just go work somewhere else. And I've been with Bowman ever since, going on 8 years now. I've been a plumber for 32 years. I started in '04 down in Florida. I worked 4 years. At the time, the requirement for a journeyman down there wasn't hours, it was just 4 years in the trade. So after 4 years, I went ahead and got my journeyman's card. Been a journeyman ever since, and came up here after about 20 years of working in the trade, and been up here ever since. My dilemma with getting a letter, stating my hours from a former employer, I've been up here almost 15 years now, and some of the companies I've worked for in the past were out of business before I even came up here, and the most recent employer down there, which is where I had a letter from to get my state card, they're no longer in business. And so, I'm not sure what I can do from this point.
Do you have any, like Derek was saying, any other W-2s, anything like that?
From
Tax
15 years ago,
No, I know.
I don't know if I could get something maybe from the IRS. I'm not sure if I could, if that's even possible.
If that's even possible now. We're not required to be kept until like 10 years.
I thought it was 7. What about any other journeyman you worked with? Like,
In the lower 48, or up here. I mean, evidently.
because I
all
guess
my
we're
hours
just
up
saying
here.
that these hours don't count because he didn't have the card, which is interesting. He's saying that they wouldn't let him have the card. Is that a policy that they're not allowed to have a apprenticeship card if they have a journeyman's license in the state? That doesn't sound right.
I don't know that, well, he's talking with the municipality, because he already had a state journeyman license, so
Yeah.
that means that to have a trainee card, the trainee card's really for a trainee, in a program. Apparently, he's already fulfilled his apprenticeship, so, for the state's review. So it does make sense, though, that, if he's already, the state looks at him as a journeyman,
Yep.
that can he work as an apprentice in town? There's nothing in writing of that would preclude him from getting a trainee card, because that's kind of the default. If you can't prove your hours, your option is to get a trainee card. But then the caveat to that is that you're supposed to be in an approved apprenticeship program. That's why I say this one's kind of unique, that he wouldn't be in an apprenticeship program because it's a state requirement. He's already got his fitness card.
Did you serve in did you go to any approved program?
No, no, on my original 4 years, you know, prior to getting my first journeyman's card in Florida, it was just OJT. They didn't have apprenticeship programs back then. When I came up here, that's the first I've heard of an apprenticeship program. That was
So you're-
back in '01.
Your history is non-union at that point, right?
Right, right. No, I've never been union.
How long is this requirement for the approved program been around?
Oh. Over the state, you mean through apprenticeship?
Yeah.
Or just our, like, you know, our requirements, or?
How did he get registered with the state if he didn't go through an approved program?
Well, he used his hours from Florida.
And Florida didn't have an approved program requirement.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah. I came through California, and I don't think when I went through it, there wasn't.
I mean, if they deemed him as a journeyman, then they would not have a requirement for him to fulfill the apprenticeship program. He's already, you know, looked at as a journeyman in the state of Florida. But he submitted, he had hours that he was able to document. So we keep these in the file, notarized letter, I mean, of hours documentation.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I know Terry's a qualified plumber, that's not the question. You know, we're always, you know, have to be consistent in how we apply our laws and our rules. And we've always very consistently required that they provide proof of hours, notarized, you know, and they have to be hours that are, you know, what I consider legal hours. And I can give you an example of one where a gentleman came in with a state license and to sit for the city test. And he said, well, you need to submit your hours. So he submitted an hours. Well, it was on his father's business's letterhead, which was a remodeling company, not even a plumbing contractor in town, in Eagle River, actually. And I said, well, you know, you didn't work for a plumbing company. He said, yeah, but I did plumbing. I says, well, how can you do plumbing if you're not in an apprenticeship program or working for a plumbing contractor? He said, well, we did kitchen remodels. I did all the plumbing, you know. I said, well, you can't count those hours. They're not legal hours.
Yeah.
So all we're looking for from anybody that comes in to take the journeyman test, regardless of whether they have their state license, is documentation that they have 8,000 hours that were gained lawfully. And the only issue with Terry is the hours that he submitted were hours that were gained during the time that he wasn't currently licensed with us. Is that correct? You weren't licensed during that, since you've been with Mullen?
Not with the muni, no.
Yeah.
With
So,
a license with a trainee card?
with anything, yeah.
No.
He didn't have anything. He
But
didn't-
he's licensed as a journeyman with the state and working though.
Yeah, which he
But-
could work outside, but he just hasn't.
So if he was working in Fairbanks during all that time, that would have been okay. But just because it's in Anchorage, it's not okay.
Well, no, that's not the issue. The issue is just providing, you know, since we don't use the state qual card as, you know, proof of hours.
Yep.
It's just providing the hours that he worked in the city
Yep.
that, you know, that are legal hours while he was actually licensed.
But is what I'm getting at is, say he works in Fairbanks under that journeyman card
Okay,
for Bowman Construction,
okay,
and then he comes in and he says, oh, I want to work in Anchorage now, and he has a journeyman card with the state, and he submits those hours,
Yes, 15,000 hours.
15,000
in
hours
Fairbanks.
in Fairbanks, not in Anchorage. He's been working legally. I assume Fairbanks doesn't have this city.
I don't know that they do. I don't think they
Or
do.
let's just say,
A location that
Yeah.
doesn't have the requirement.
yes,
Yeah.
Nanacheck or something. So he's been working
Right,
15,000
well,
hours.
those hours, yeah, I would agree
They
with
would count.
those hours would apply. But once you're in the municipality, you know, you're required to have a license, whether it be a trainee card or a journeyman, you know, a trainee card for those hours to apply.
So is the hang up here that he didn't have a trainee card while he was doing all of that?
Correct, he was not properly licensed. So it's not fair to count the hours that he's not properly licensed in the municipality, which is consistent, you know, of how we have applied the requirements, you know, for years. So if we were to allow him to take the test, we would be giving him a special dispensation, basically, to other people that we've denied over the years.
Well, and just so, on the agenda side, it sounds like we're kind of shifting over to the Muni's ability to respond to his things. Just sure that we have a process of
Right.
going, he's giving his presentation to you guys and he has his
Yeah.
rebuttal plaque. I don't mind that, I just wanna make sure that we're following
Yeah, I was just
the
responding to
process, so.
questions.
Yeah,
I-
I'm asking a million questions.
Well, and I think that's fine, I
What's
just wanna
important?
make sure, you do have an ability to reply back, but is there anything else in your presentation that you wanna give?
No,
the
not
other ones
really.
in here?
I just think I need to go dig up that other letter.
Like I
But
say,
who
we're
does the
at-
letter come from? The other letter?
It was Paramount Plumbing, my former employer down in Florida. I'm gonna try and get a hold of them. I think I might have my old boss's home phone number,
You might wanna check with the state too.
I was gonna
the state of
suggest
Florida.
the state of Florida.
Well, I mean, I've had a journeyman card down there since '87.
Well, and including the state of Alaska, if they keep records of your letters, the same, if you had the exact same letter that you sent to the Muni that you went to the state of Alaska with the hours, they hopefully would have that on file, like you guys do,
Yeah.
to where the stuff is on file. If you could present that same letter and say,
We would accept that.
what I sent to the city is the same as this letter here, that seems, hopefully they've archived that stuff.
Couldn't it even be from, not even from the company at this point? Because my hours were signed off not by companies, but by the journeyman I was working with. I think I used my apprenticeship training book where they signed off every week on how many hours I worked. I think that's what I used for my proof of hours.
Well, and that's what the sheet metal is supposed to do. I mean, they go through the apprenticeship program, but all the hours through the apprenticeship program are approved by journeymen that they're working with.
Yeah, so does the letter have to come from a company, or can it come from a journeyman or journeyman plumber?
Well, I mean, it says notarized copy of proof of hours, I think. But
Yeah,
like I say, we're
letterhead.
usually open, to options. I mean, it's just that there hasn't been anything provided yet. I mean, so if you had the letter that you gave to the state, we absolutely would accept that. I mean, or look at it anyway, and submit it, and go from, use that as possibly even proof of it.
Okay. Do you have anything else on your testimony, such a hard word to say in this environment? Your presentation, else on that?
Well, no, I think, just said, I believe that we're being consistent with how we've applied our process and our codes over the years, by not allowing Terry, to submit those hours. I did some research and what kind of work, you've been doing, and I know he said service work, and trim work, but just so you know, the trim work is plumbing, setting fixtures that, are required to be licensed to do that. My understanding is that, that you've done some rough-in plumbing over the years as well. I mean, but primarily now, I know you're doing service work and boilers, for Ralph, who he works for. Ralph's a straight shooter. And Ralph said once in a while he does some trim when things are slow in the other area. Not doing too much in the rough end, but that is plumbing, and you do have to be licensed to do that work. Boiler maintenance, service work, which is a very, very narrow, area before you can you're getting into plumbing. It doesn't take much from that service work to become plumbing work. Does not necessarily have to be licensed to do that work. And those hours wouldn't count either, because if the service work is not plumbing. So it's kind of a catch-22 in a way, so.
I got a couple of them going on for me.
Yeah. So I think that, as you mentioned, that the best thing he could do is try to get hold of the letter that he submitted to the state for his initial approval of the state from Florida. That would be the easiest for us.
But you'd want that original, wouldn't you? Because it's notarized.
No, you wouldn't have to actually have the original one if they can make you a copy and give you the copy.
A notarized copy.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be reasonable about it. It's not, typically we're looking for the original, but, there's extenuating circumstances, and this is one of those. I believe that there's no reason why we wouldn't entertain looking at that.
Okay.
As long as we knew it came from the state, or have their, if they have a copy, have them send it directly to us. That way your hands aren't touching it. Their copy and they're mailed in there.
Okay.
We know there hasn't been anything happening, not that I know that you wouldn't do that, but just take that out of the equation.
Okay.
Could I see the where the language is that says his hours doesn't count, or it has to be, you have to be a registered apprentice, or what documents that in
Well-
about the city?
It's not black and white. I mean, it's inferred by all, several sections.
Well, enlighten me on the inferred.
Well, that's all try. Well, here, let me pass it out to you guys.
You gotta blow a whole lot of smoke at me.
I don't know if you have a copy of this, Barry. Have one for Paul.
See what we're looking for.
Because what we're doing, this is the prerequisite to taking the test. And is what I feel like that's doing, a couple things is, it keeps somebody like me, if I hadn't been an electrician, I said, I just want to have a journeyman's card too, I know a little bit about plumbing. I could pass that test. Because I know a little bit of plumbing, I plumbed my house, so I'm kind of a plumber.
Yeah.
And so I want to take the test. And so the thing that keeps me from taking the test, because I could probably pass the damn thing, right? So now it's just the hours. And so in that case, my hands are obviously, I'm not a plumber. I can tell he is, just from his hands. So, I've got some sympathy going for the guy on that. So, how I want to see how clear this is. So where do I look to see what the requirement was so that he would know that this is what's got to happen?
Well, there's, the top one there is what the information that's provided that to anybody that wants to apply take the journeyman test for the journeyman plumbing.
Shall provide proof of at least 8,000 hours of previous experience personally installing, altering, and repairing work in the plumbing trade. Okay, hadn't said that I had to have an apprentice card yet in Anchorage.
Right.
Okay.
And then the
Letters of proof shall be notarized on the company letterhead from a certified contractor in the trade which you're applying for. Okay, so that answers my earlier question. It's got to come from the contractor. Letters need to say the plumbing state lists the actual hours you've accumulated in the plumbing trade, not just dates of employment in lieu of previous experience. Discretion building board, mechanical subcommittee. Credit may be allowed for each year a fraction of the attendance of a recognized school if the course is taken by applicant was primary mechanical. We do not accept the state form for verification hours. Each applicant shall submit a copy of the current Alaska Department of Labor certificate of plumber journeyman card for complying with the statute. I haven't seen anything in here that says he has to have this.
Well, this is part of it. So that's the
Okay.
the packet they get to fill out, and then
I still feel like I can take the test if I could just get somebody to sign me a, hokey letter right now.
well, there's always that potential. I mean, that's why we try to, when we get letters from out of state, we call, we make sure that the person actually worked for, them. We will look up with the state, that's whatever state it may be, whether it's Florida, that was really a registered licensed plumbing contractor, in that state.
Yep.
We actually do the research.
Gotcha.
Sure, because you're right, you could, with today's, Microsoft Publisher, whatever, you could dummy up anything you want. I mean,
Yeah.
And, so we do a little due diligence.
But this part here never says he had to have a city, if you're working in the city, that something else applies. It doesn't say that.
No, and I'd say you're not going to see that it specifically states anywhere that the hours that are submitted must be hours that were worked while properly licensed. But I mean, like I say, I believe it's inferred. I mean, you wouldn't, otherwise a contractor could just write up anything for anybody, for their son, for their nephew. I mean, it has to be valid hours. So the next section is a section out of the Anchorage Administrative Code, which says page 45 to 267. I pointed out just general provisions, just highlighted a few things here, that a person holding, must, except as allowed under the paragraph, no person shall administer or perform work regulated by this code, except a person holding a valid, unexpired, unrevoked contractor's license or certificate of qualification as required by this code and state law. So it's basically saying that you're not allowed to work in the city unless you're properly licensed.
I think it said a state license. He has the state license, doesn't he?
He does have a state license, yes.
Where's the part about it's got to be the city license?
And it's all spread out through here, like I say.
Okay. I'm still reading.
The next page, that arrow there, performing work, all work regulated with this code shall be performed by individuals appropriately licensed in the relevant trade in accordance with state law and this code. So, I mean, when it says this code, it's talking about our municipal licensing as well. I mean, so that's why it differentiates between the state and this code, the administrative code. Next section, it shall be unlawful for any person to conduct, carry on, engage in the business of, or act in the capacity of a contractor in a trade covered by this code without first being issued a valid municipal contractor's license and when required, a certificate of qualification. So that's your municipal certificate of qualification. Next page, F, it shall be unlawful for any person to labor in the capacity of a plumber, gas fitter, or sheet metal journeyman without first being issued a valid journeyman certificate of qualification by the municipality. It shall be unlawful to labor as a plumber or sheet metal trainee without first being issued a valid trainee certificate of qualification by the municipality. So that's saying that, you know, any work that you're doing isn't legal. Therefore, if it's not legal, the hours shouldn't be counted. That's the logic we're using.
So which paragraph are you saying that that's?
H.
Yeah,
I think that's H.
yeah, F and H. F is journeyman then.
Okay.
The next, page D, just states that the plumber or sheet metal journeyman shall provide evidence of at least 4 hours or 8,000 hours minimum previous experience personally installing. That's that same language that was on the registration packet. Next page, H, applicants for a plumber or sheet metal trainee certificate of qualification are required to have prior experience, but shall provide evidence of working for a properly certified contractor and be enrolled in an approved apprenticeship program. So that wouldn't necessarily apply unless you wanted to start another apprenticeship program. Then B, provide evidence of the required experience and training, which is pointing that out. B and C, plumber, show. Be issued to a person who meets the application requirements, you know, so you'd have to look back at the application requirements, just stating the hours. And that's pretty much it, so. So I guess to summarize, it's, you know, to work in Anchorage, you're supposed to be properly licensed, whether you're working as an apprentice or journeyman. And if you're not working legally. If you're not working legally, it doesn't seem fair that those hours would be legal hours.
Who's responsible for that? Is it the individual or the contractor?
Both,
So Bowman's out there, he's got a guy out there that's not licensed and he doesn't know it? It'd be like me hiring an engineer who says he's a PE, but he's not, and I don't verify it.
I don't know if Ralph knows it or not, so I don't, you know,
Who knows?
yeah. I mean, I assume he does. I mean, the guy's, you know, Ralph's been plumbing here for a lot of years. It's a pretty, you know, the plumbing community is pretty small, especially, you know, when you're doing residential and stuff. All the guys know each other, they all work with each other. There's, you know, only a handful of companies that actually, you know, work in the residential field, you know, Partouche and Bowman and at the time Bittner and, you know, Bly and they have a lot of them work for all those companies at one point or another or with people that work for them. And they know the requirements, license requirements, and I'm sure, you know, that to some extent that Terry is aware that there's, you know, there's licensing requirements. He felt that just, I believe, just the work he was doing wasn't necessarily, or led to believe, I guess per Mike Cook, that you didn't need to be licensed for that, for setting trim, which is incorrect. And it's hard for me to believe that Mike doesn't know that, because Mike's been plumbing here for a lot of years too, you know, and being, you know, running Partouche on the plumbing side for many years. So, we know that they've had people with those companies that have not been properly licensed. You know, what happens when things get busy, those companies are looking for people, anybody that can do the work, you know. And even though they're might not be licensed, they'll bring them on and they'll put them to work because, you know, every man hour is money in their pocket. So they don't always make sure that they're properly licensed. You know, some companies are better at it than others. They see kind of, I think to some degree my experience has been over my 25 years here is that they just kind of see how long they can get by with it until they get caught. And once they get caught, then they push them to get their licensing.
Obviously, there's no penalty.
Yeah,
Well, there is.
We actually find contractors
Yeah, the
for
last
having,
page.
for having trainees on site and no journeyman.
Yeah, I
Stuff
provided
like
you
that.
this is the section,
Fines.
the fines, it's supposed to fine both the individual and the contractors, because the contractor does have some responsibility. He shouldn't
We
be
just
allowing them
fined-
to do the work if they're not properly licensed. And,
We
you
just
know.
fined a company last week for that.
What are the fines by chance?
They're not very high, that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a
They need to
slap.
be a lot stiffer.
For journeyman working with us, it's first offense.
Oh,
It's
uh,
below it, sorry.
Yeah.
I was focusing on the bullets.
Is the issuance fee plus the test fee and a $250 fine. And then further down, it talks about the contractor to whom the violator is working for shall be subject to the same fine as the violator. So,
And for a trainee, it's $60 first time around. So that's nothing.
Yeah, that's,
It doesn't incentivize them to come in.
yeah, there's no real worry there.
No,
It almost encourages the company
to actually,
to do it
Right.
because he gives them longer to exploit the workers.
right.
Yeah.
And of telling somebody like this, that, oh, you don't need it, it's just that, it keeps them
Right.
pinned at that company better as well.
Yeah,
If I could do that to my engineers, that would probably work. You don't need a PE.
We'll leave it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's kind of the same thing, you know, it's unfortunate it happens, but that's what happens. I mean, if all the contractors say, hey, you know, you're not going to work unless you provide me both your state and your city licenses. You know, but with Partouche, he had his trainee card, so you know, so they did give him one at one time. That was before you got your state license, so is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that was when it first came up, I just wanted to get to work. I
Yeah.
went to work for Partouche and
So I only saw the letter from Bowman, but you actually have hours for Partouche that's still around.
but apparently they would be considered illegal too, at least.
Well, you had a.
Well, if you had your trainee card.
You had your trainee card.
Well, I had that for 2 years and then it expired and they wouldn't let me renew it. And so the remaining 2 years at Partouche would have been under the same category.
Yeah. Did they ever talk to you about giving you a temporary journeyman card, or at the time?
This process, I saw something in here about temporary. What is that?
Well, that if a person, if they submit their request, well, once if their hours are approved, but they haven't tested yet, they'll give them a temporary card to work as a journeyman until the next test. They're basically giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're
Gonna pass the test.
yeah. But if they don't pass the test, then it's a one-time only. So that probably wouldn't have really applied to his situation.
But in this situation where we're meeting here, if we were to find in favor of Mr. Wise, would he be issued a temporary permit until the test so that he can continue his work?
Well, if you were in favor of him, you're basically saying that his hours are acceptable, so I would say probably yes,
Okay. As one
until the next test is in February.
in February.
First week.
Do you have any rebuttal? I mean, this is where we're doing
We're doing this quite informally.
as well, but
That's fine.
You're watching the sausage being made.
and I don't know if we need to.
Well, when
Chime in.
coming here, I was just really hoping that I could get my hours accepted, you know, so I could take the journeyman's exam for the municipality. I'm wanting to be compliant, you know, and I'll do whatever it takes to be compliant, but if I can't get these hours accepted today, that means tomorrow I'm out of work. And I got bills to pay. I mean, I'm a plumber. I've been a plumber for more than half of my life. You know, I'm kind of stuck in a rut where I don't know, I can maybe call some of my old employers if I can get a hold of them, going back, way back. I can remember who they were.
what's the process just to get the temporary card? I mean, this apprentice, he can't, that can't be true. Tell me that can't be true, what he just said, that he can't go to work tomorrow.
Well, I mean, he can go to work tomorrow, but he has to be licensed for the type of work that he's doing.
Okay, and
Which,
is
my
there,
understanding is primarily service work, which doesn't require a license, but, so unless that's changed, I don't know, that's what your
Well,
letter said.
One day to the next, I never know what I'm doing till I get in
well,
there.
why couldn't he have a training card? Okay, because he says that they told him he couldn't have it because he was already a journeyman. So he can't have a training card?
Yeah. Well, I don't think it would be unreasonable to allow him to have a trainee card, you know, as long as he's working as a trainee, meaning that he's being supervised by a journeyman. He can't work, you know, and they're not gonna, you know, wanna,
When
you
that
know,
pays when you cut.
well, I don't know, I can't speak to that, but I know that there's others out there that are in that probably similar situation that are probably getting journeyman scale, you know, and they're probably working by themselves, but legally they're not supposed to be. And that happens quite often. You get out on a job and, you know, he's asked for the card, have a trainee card, where's your journeyman? Well, he's getting parts. That's usually the answer. So, that happens, but I would be support of him allowing to get a trainee card, I mean, but, you know, until he can, you know, prove the hours or,
Okay. Any questions here? Okay.
I got nothing else. I mean, right now I can't think of anything.
Alright, other than our own opinion.
Yeah, I'd rather cut off my finger right now than make a decision on this.
Alright. Well, I mean, I guess then let's kind of get into the deliberation part of it. And, looking through this packet, number one, I don't feel that you purposely did this on purpose to get out of, being in compliance. It sounded like once you were notified, you tried to get into compliance, and then that's where we are today.
And I plan to, you know, whatever it takes, from this point. And that's what I'm trying to get these hours approved so I can take the journeyman's exam for the municipality.
And I agree, Eric, with you. I'm reading through this whole packet here, and nothing in here says, it does say you're not supposed to work, but nothing in here says the hours that you work are exempt from being, I mean, the stuff I underlined in here.
It's a leap between the two, and what it says on this thing where it says what you need to do to take the plumbing exam, from this, he can take the exam, what I see.
There's
Just this time. Now, I see what they're saying, you blowing a little smoke at me and distracting me a little bit. I see the things, and you're not supposed to be working in the city without having either a journeyman card or a trainee card, which makes sense. Oh, can I ask another question? A big part about being a trainee is on-the-job training, but I thought also a big part of the training is that you basically have to go through a training program at night, because that, I think there's real benefit to that too. Is that not really truly a requirement part of it? You can use just 8,000 hours and not have went through any training program?
well, if you're already properly licensed in another state, and, you know, they have a similar program, that's what we look at, but they have the same amount of hours. We're looking for 8,000 hours. So if you had to gain 8,000 hours in another state, and you had documentation of that, we would accept that. Person comes in to be a trainee, to get a trainee card, this is a state requirement, not a municipal requirement, that you be in an accredited apprenticeship program, whether it be through the union, or whether it be through AvTech, or ABC, or the other ones, you have to be enrolled, you know, in.
To even start out as a plumbing trainee?
To get a trainee card. And you need that with the state too. State's not gonna give you a trainee card, today anyway, and I don't know what it was time when Terry got his, but the rules currently, and have been for quite a few years, that you have to be in or maybe you sign an agreement that you will be or something, I'm not sure what they require specifically, but we have to have documentation so that they're meeting the state requirement, which would be to be enrolled in some type of program. union, it's a letter from the union, 'cause that's, you know, 'cause we
Yeah,
know
you're
that they're
union.
going through their school there. From non-union, it's a letter from the contractor saying that they're enrolled in ABC or Avtech.
So to get the training card, that's one of the requirements today.
It is.
And then, but maybe when he started, that wasn't a requirement.
That's what I'm guessing back. I'm not certain. It's been that way for quite a while, but I'm not certain what it was, to be honest, in 2005. But you know, and I don't know. Did you, may I would ask, did you have a trainee card from the state? Is that what you got, or you just?
Yeah, I had the apprentice card for the state and for, as a matter of fact, and for the municipality.
And you didn't have to enroll in a training program back then?
Not that I'm aware of. All I know is I brought a letter into the state and into the municipality from Touche Plumbing, you know, saying that I was employed there.
I definitely think this is a unique scenario. I mean, I fully, the gravity of making exceptions to how you guys do stuff is very heavy. I do feel this is a unique scenario since you already had your journeyman before you even got to the state. Sounds like the state of Alaska approved it based on your previous experience. We just don't have that paperwork. It's somewhere. I highly recommend that you, you know, the state of Alaska is really not that slow. A lot of the stuff might even be, well, they could probably dig out the letter in about a week, is my guess.
I think it's a little more stringent for them than it is us. I think I could go to another state and just have letters from 2 other engineers. I don't know that I'd have to prove out 8,000 hours and, you know, once you're a professional engineer, it seems like it's a little more stringent.
I mean, yeah, you have those comedy requirements that you met the requirements at the time you took your test, and it's, but there's a lot of, no, I agree. The other thing that I was looking at was on this packet here, number one, it does say at the discretion of the subcommittee, which I guess is us. On there, and I agree, this doesn't say anything about, it's a compelling argument to me when you said, talked about the Fairbanks hours. And feeling that this is, he does not knowingly did this to be in non-compliance. You still would, does this have to go either way against the fine? I mean, he's getting fined because he was working without it.
I believe we waived the fine.
Yeah.
The first time.
Yeah.
First time, okay, so I mean, in my mind, the fine is legit because you, and with your owner as well, your, the contractor should also be fined for not verifying. I don't know, my feeling on this is that, to, find in favor of you, Mr. Wise, to have you provided a temporary, because I'm also, it's obvious that you know what you're doing and that you know, we're not putting a menace on society here. But I'm also a person who doesn't want to get in the way of people actually making a living because they're confident in what they're doing. We get the temporary card. My guess is the muni is probably going to bounce this to the full board, potentially. But you get that paperwork in from the state and be able to show that to where it is good to go compliance, then I'm hoping the muni won't find the need to bring it to the full board, because by then, because otherwise, if we find in favor of the muni, you do the paperwork, and then we go back to this whole process again, we're basically getting in the way, in my opinion, we're getting in the way of you making a living out of not your own fault. And that, for a couple weeks of not being able to do work is, but if you don't turn that paperwork in, then we'll see you again in 2 weeks in front of the full board.
If we had the paperwork, we wouldn't even be here.
Right.
So, I mean,
So that's basically what I'm trying to do, the way I'm feeling is that allow him to continue his job while he gets that paperwork into you guys, and then we'll be
is signed by you three and is posted and he gets the notice, there's 5 days for either him to appeal it or the municipality to appeal it.
Okay. And, but then can the groups withdraw their appeal?
They can.
All right. So, I think that that's my guess. I can't speak for Gary and the Muni regarding whether, because I like I said, the precedence is there, and I don't lightly go against that precedence, because I know you get an influx of people going, well, you did it for Mr. Watt.
Oh, yeah. Well, it just wipes out the integrity of the process, to some degree.
To some degree,
Yeah.
and I think this is why, I mean, do we follow this up with any sort of letter of findings or anything like that for these three towns?
We can, and usually it's just a letter, one-page decision rolling out what you have decided, and you can put in there, because this, and this.
Okay.
Or you can make it a separate sheet.
All right. I mean, that would, at least not just be a blanket, this means nothing anymore in the municipality. I think if we could say because of these, relying heavily on the state requirements of the letter that was there.
If you state it in your decision when you make that, it will be in.
Okay, does that create precedence issues?
Well, it just depends, so that I'm clear on what your thoughts are, is that, so you're favoring accepting his hours, is that correct?
I'm favoring that, well, I don't want to pull the thread on the sweater of saying this is not clear, that these hours, because they're illegal, because they happen to occur within a 50-mile radius of where we're sitting right now, cannot apply towards this. Because I do think it's, if this went to court, I think you would lose
I do
that
too.
argument.
I do too. I think this right here, I could drive a truck through this.
Well,
And if
that's
I were a
handout,
good
too.
lawyer,
That's
which I'm not,
That's a handout, that's not
Yeah,
ordinance.
well,
Well,
but
even
this
if
is what I would have
it's
read to figure out what I am supposed to do, and I don't see anything where it really makes that clear at all. And by your own admission, what he could have done, if he was just working in Fairbanks, for the same contractor doing the same exact thing, it would count.
Because
And
he'd be properly licensed in that jurisdiction.
Yeah, and
Which would have been the state license it currently has.
yeah, so that's one part of, I think technically by this, I feel good about saying, if you guys really want it to be that way, I think you need to clean this up, that'd be part of my recommendation. The other part is, technically what you're doing by this requiring the hours is we're making sure no one can take this test that really shouldn't be allowed to take this test. And I feel like this almost comes at our discretion of the building board, that it's painfully obvious to me that this guy actually has been working as a plumber, and if anybody should be allowed to take this test, he's not, I don't feel like we're letting somebody take a test that's the son of a plumber that just wants to have a journeyman card. I don't think there's any kind of even stretch to that, and I feel like that's a discretion thing that, you know, if people want to try to get around the program and come in here and not have this level of believability, I don't think it's going to undermine your program that much.
I don't think that's ever been an issue, his ability, and that's not, and I empathize for him as well. I mean, I came up through the trades, and I understand that, I've been on that side, you know, and it's just a matter of trying to apply the codes consistently and be fair, give it the same, you know, to everybody.
But I can guarantee you that the system is flawed, because judging from, because I came through programs and I've been on this, and I know the system is completely flawed, because you got the Fox Garden hen house. You got contractors that are writing the letter to certify that this guy's worked those hours, and it's in their benefit to say that the guy's worked the hours, maybe that he hasn't even worked those.
I agree.
So it's not a good system at all. It compares nothing to the IBW or the plumbers union, that is a totally disinterested third party that's certifying these hours in the training. That had some merit and believability, but when you switch, and the only thing is
No, there's a lot of, you know, given, you know, benefit of the doubt, I mean, type that's given,
yeah.
you know, they're putting their name on.
But I feel like I'd be given as much benefit to the doubt on some of those, I bet, if I actually looked at the guy getting the paper, I bet you it's gonna be, his is more believable. So I feel that with this written this way, I feel like there's enough hold there enough room for our discretion in this case.
Well, and to that effect, I mean, the holdup is, you know, the trainee certificate. And looking through, I agree that looking through the handout doesn't spell that out adequately. Looking through the municipal code, I think that there's, you know, that is stated, if not entirely clearly. I see where your point is by looking at the code. But I feel that kind of overlooks the fact that maybe he didn't have the certification that the municipal code is specifically pointing out, and overlooks the fact that he did have some certification while he was doing that. It wasn't the right one, but he still had his state journeyman card while he was doing all of that. Granted that that's not everything, but it seems like it should account for something.
That he was working as a journeyman.
That he was working, well, that he had, if not the certification, a form of certification while he was performing these hours.
But we don't really have anything that addresses that, otherwise guys with a state license would never have to even come and take a test.
Well, and that's the other part of it,
They
he's
can
not,
just keep going as long as they can for the cop.
Doesn't the state have a test?
They do.
Is it a different test than what you guys get?
Oh, yeah. You know, one thing, the reason, and this was a question, why do we require licensing? And it's because the main reason is because we have a lot of amendments in the municipality. And we actually went out, that licensing was challenged, I don't know, back in late, like 2007 or 8. And all the contract, we had meetings, the contractors voted 40-something to 2 to keep licensing. They wanted municipal licensing. They wanted to make sure that the guys that they were hiring were, you know, knew the code, knew the local amendments, et cetera. So, because that's the main reason, because the state doesn't typically amend their codes. I mean, if they do, it's only a couple, very few. We have a lot, you know, several amendments. As Craig well knows, he's been on the committee for many years. So that's why, you know, we try to maintain licenses within the municipality.
Strange that the electrical, they have amendments, and it's,
Well, personally, I've always been a proponent to think that the electrician should be licensed with the city, you know, but that, to them, to a lot of people, it's just another fee, you know, but it's because, you know, that they do.
they're so good. I'm kind of weird why the plumbing and there must be something different between the two worlds.
Yeah, I don't know the history behind it, though.
I don't either, 'cause
I've always kind of wondered.
The non-union electricians are so good in Alaska that it scares me for the union, to be honest. So
Well,
I-
plumbing the same way, I mean,
I think
there's
they're-
some really good plumbers out there working.
I wonder if really the state, or the city license is doing that much good. But anyway, it is what it is. At the end of the day, I feel like, I agree with you. I would, at this point, unless somebody can sway me, unless you got something that sway me, I'm inclined to comply with this.
I have a question to you guys, if I can, because I'm
Yeah.
just curious. So do you feel that we're misinterpreting any of this? Because when it comes down to your authority is that you can't waive code.
I don't think the code says that the hours, the unlawful hours cannot be used towards his current hours. Right. That's where I could go point by point and say, from the regulations for when you can do engineering in the state of Alaska are also similar. You're not supposed to do engineering, you're not supposed to do that. And I could go point by point through this and say, well, I can interpret that completely different than what you're interpreting it on, versus saying that just Joe Schmo, this stuff in here unlawfully, a person doing this means that an electrician can't be doing plumbing work. I'm also hesitant to state that as the basis for this, because then that starts completely unraveling your entire basis for what you guys are doing today.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's based on many, many years of being consistently applied, not trying to make up new rules or anything.
I think it's folklore at this point,
Yeah.
almost. I think it's not an unreasonable thing, and for the most of these guys, I think it's totally logical.
Yes, I
But
concur.
But it does, to me, start to fall apart when you're coming from Florida, or when you're coming from Fairbanks, and you're coming into Anchorage, and it gets a little bit messy. I don't feel like it's really as airtight as I would have wanted to be.
Yeah, it just kind of condones bad behavior. I mean, by accepting, because go ahead and work all the hours you want. You don't have to be licensed. We'll accept them when the time comes that you feel that you might want to come in and get your license. I mean,
Right.
And I think the discretion here that we have the ability to, because it says here, at the discretion of the mechanical subcommittee is the 8,000 hours. And are those 8,000 hours applicable to be able to take the test? And so we're not, I mean, we could say the 8,000 hours was his 4 years for Florida, that the state of Alaska figured was appropriate for his journeyman. So at some point in his career, does he have 8,000 hours of applicable plumbing experience to be able to sit for the test? And to me, the other thing is we're allowing them to sit for the test. We're not just giving them an outright license and saying, go free. They still have to pass the bigger barrier of competence, which is ultimately the test.
yeah. I just, for me, it's, what do we do from this point forward? I mean, when people come in and I, look at their information and get out, I mean, I agree that,
I think this
based on
needs
this,
to be
we need to read, well, that's the handout too. We can do
Well,
anything we want in a handout.
But where's
You know,
then
The
there's some,
ordinance, this is the ordinance. Like Keith mentioned, you read the handout, he agrees, but you start reading into the ordinance a little bit, it's a little more clear what the intent is, even though it's not,
but this doesn't tell you how to get these.
it's not black and white.
It doesn't tell you how to become a, this tells you how to do it. I mean, it's a handout.
It's a handout just to provide some guidance of what.
But this document will never tell you what process you gotta go through.
Probably not, because
Yeah.
it's ordinance, it's law, I mean, I guess, could it be tightened up? Yeah, probably could, but, to make it more clear, but a lot of, codes are based on what's the intent of the code, what are we trying to do here?
Right.
That's what this is too, the intent is here, of what's, what we're trying to do here.
Well,
And I think the intent, it did happen, not exactly right though.
I don't disagree with that.
I think he got 8,000 hours
Yeah.
a couple times,
Yeah.
and I don't feel like the guy needs to do another 8,000 hours in the city with an apprenticeship, a training card. I don't.
Well, I agree, I wouldn't want to take,
So it seems like this is the reason to have a 3-member panel to look at it, and at our discretion, we're taking it off you. You didn't allow this, you're holding steady. We're saying in this case, we feel like he has proven enough to us that he has 8,000 hours.
And honestly, this paragraph G in here, page 48, allows us to count his Florida work.
We just don't have the proof of it.
yeah, well, we count that work too, but we just usually need time.
Does this in here say somewhere how that it has, in this document, that it has to be, how that those hours are,
It just shall provide evidence of at least 4 years or 80,000 hours minimum or previous experience. Do you have your Florida journeyman's card with you by chance?
No, right before I came here, I was looking for it, I got it
Well,
somewhere.
we accept that too, if he has a journeyman card from another state,
That has
I usually
4
go
years
online and I
experience?
see what their requirements are, and if they're equivalent, we approve it, I'm not trying to be hard, I'm trying to be consistent on how we've applied this over the course of the year. Just to provide some evidence of lawful hours.
The other thing that's gonna ding you in a court is because it specifically says no credit shall be allowed for experience gained while doing any work. Once there's a statement in there that says no credit shall be allowed for this, you didn't say no credit's not gonna be allowed for unlawful hours. You've already set something in here saying it's not gonna be allowed for this, and then to infer, I'm just letting you know, if you're looking for ways to clean this up.
No, we appreciate that, that's part of what we look forward, to the panel's doing too.
That's
I
gonna
mean-
be set precedence of what you said would not be allowed, and since the hours.
Right. Well, I already knew going into this that it's clear that if there was something more black and white that would make it an open and shut, and then I'm certain that we will be submitting something to tighten the language up a little bit too.
Yeah.
So that the intent is very clear on what we require. I mean, we could change the handout tomorrow, I mean, if that's the case, but it's just that my feeling was just that the language is here, the intent is here, it's just not spelled out black and white.
Okay.
But I don't disagree with Eric that, you know, you as a guys' panel, looking at the big picture, that's your prerogative to, if you feel that he meets all of that, you know, it's just a departure, and like I say, it takes me out of it, you know, we did our job consistently with the way we have in the past. I think this is a very unique situation. In my 25 years, I've never encountered this exact scenario. Normally when, you know, the people just realize, yeah, okay, I gotta get my hours, or, you know, has Terry done everything he can to show proof hours? No, he hasn't. He hasn't tried to go to the state to get the letter. If he had that letter tomorrow, I mean, it would be done. I mean, it wouldn't, you know, and they may have a copy of it, and that would be great. That'd be fantastic, because we could just, that would be proof and put in the file. You could sign up for the test that day. It's just that we just didn't have anything concrete showing that he had lawful hours.
Isn't there an online way of verifying journeyman cards in other states, even if they aren't expired?
I'm not aware of that.
I've got an Alaska one, and
I
I bet
usually-
you,
I
it's
usually
been
just-
expired for years, and I bet you couldn't find it.
Yeah, I usually just call up the department that oversees the licensing and just talk to them and see what kind of records they have.
All right, so, I mean, there's multiple different ways of, I feel like all of us feel that you're,
Yeah, well, whatever the outcome is today, I will definitely bring something in.
Can you get a letter from Partouche for those 2 years that you were licensed?
Probably,
I mean, that's 4,000 hours plus right there. I mean, that's,
it depends on how long they keep their, records, files.
well, I mean, Mike knows how long you worked there. He knows that if you work steady or not, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
If you were, you know, during those years, those were pretty busy years. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you
Yeah,
probably worked more than 2,000 hours.
even though I was laid off every spring, I was not laid off more than 30 days.
Yeah, and then a lot of days you guys are working six days a week too.
Mhm.
let's see.
Because all that just adds to the, so if I were to pull out his folder, I could document, yeah, this guy, somebody challenged us, for example. Somebody says, hey, this guy, is he documentation he's licensed. And I want to be able to pull those hours out and say, yeah, here they are right here. This is the documentation.
But from Partouche, that would only be the first 2 years.
Right. But still, that's, like I say, that's, potentially 4,000 hours or so right here.
Yeah, I was hoping, like the state of Alaska, we have
You can look us up.
You
I don't
can
think
look
you-
us up
I don't think you can
online.
look,
Find anything?
yeah, that's because we're like, interfacing with, we have a professional issue there, so I think they let people look at us, make sure we're really professional engineers, and we're not just saying that.
yeah, there's a contractor license reference site, but I'm not seeing anything for
You can find contractors' licenses, but I'm not sure you
I don't
can
think
find
down to the journeyman.
down to the journey.
journeyman.
Yeah.
All right, so if he was able to produce his Florida license card, this meets shall provide evidence of at least 4 years or 8,000 hours minimum previous experience, because in order to have gotten that, he would have needed 4 years experience. So that's one way to show compliance.
Yep.
If he was able to get the letter from the state of Alaska, that's another way of showing compliance.
Yep. But I mean, I think there are options there that most people normally, they
Yeah,
follow through to do.
honestly,
I mean,
you
I
could have
just
tried
had-
a little harder.
When our job, we would have been on here a half hour ago.
I've had guys say, I can't do this, I can't, and then, but they put a little effort into it, and they can. I'm not saying Terry hasn't tried, but I think there are a couple options that if it would have been done, potentially wouldn't even gotten to this point. That's,
True.
I don't know. One hand, I don't want to open the barn doors for everybody else who does not meet this specific.
well, those are, there's those that are out there that truly are trying to circumvent the system.
Yes.
And I've seen it.
And I don't wanna be
I call
doing
those
this-
places from outside that don't exist.
I don't want to be doing this once a month.
I know Terry's not one of those. I mean, I realize
Yeah.
that. But it's just all a matter of maintaining the integrity of the program, which is my job. Or part of my job.
So if I had the state send letters directly to you, who would have put them in attention of
You could- to me, if it's a
Yes, probably both to Gary and Tim, just to make sure it gets, so no, you're a busy man, I don't know.
yeah.
I always shotgun that stuff out whenever I do it, I'm like, someone's gonna get it.
No, I would attend to it right away. I mean,
Yes.
I would walk it through. I mean, get this thing going.
And then once he submits that, he can get you the 10.
Yeah, we're talking about the letter, if you get a copy of the letter that you submitted to the state when you originally signed up for the state test. Because you said you had one for the city and one for the state, and you don't know what happened to your city one, but hopefully they have a state one on file. And, you know, you might want to even just go by their office on Muldoon there and just stop in. That's where they would have it, most likely. If they keep in their, I don't know what the retention.
I'm gonna try to find the original, I've got it home somewhere.
Check.
Oh, do you?
If I can't do
That'd be
that,
great.
then I'll get it to state.
And then what about proof of Florida journeyman, because that would have shown 4 years. What about,
Yeah, either or. I mean,
Okay.
those are things we typically accept.
and does that have to be a card, can that be a letter, email, something?
A card, we take a copy of an old card, or something, you know, something from the state of Florida, whoever the governing agent is there, that, agency that, could provide him a letter statement that, yes, he was licensed as a journeyman these years, here's his license number on their letterhead, that would be acceptable. And these are all things that we've, you know, gotten before, and we accept.
Okay.
It takes a little work, but once, you know, on the individual's part.
Actually, that version isn't listed on your letter, is it?
What's that?
That you accept a journeyman card from another state?
No, you know, we're not, the handout's just like, say, that's a guidance system, that covers 99% of the
Well-
applications, you know. Usually it's slam dunk, and once in a while we get these that are a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Is there something in here that states that you specifically won't take journeyman cards in the state of Alaska?
Probably not in the, I don't think it's in here, it's in the.
Because if you were willing to accept a card from the state of Florida, why wouldn't you accept a card from the state of Alaska?
Well, the reason being is that because they were not, you know, it's the same thing that happened with Florida, but we haven't proven that Florida's not doing a good job at vetting out their applicants. We have with the state. The state does not vet those hours.
But is that stated somewhere?
That's
Well, just in the,
That's one of the
just
few
in-
in the handout, it does say that what they would.
is it law anywhere?
Do
No,
not accept state form.
it's just policy.
Form but not licensed.
Because I mean, you still, I mean, you would still put them through a vetting process, right?
You mean the state still has that?
I mean, sorry, let me see if I can word that better. Regardless of the form of, regardless of the form that experience took form, or the proof of that experience took form, or you would still vet that person. I mean, you would still call up so say it was just another letter from the state of Florida that he gave documentation of the hours that he spent working. You would still call that company and verify the hours, assuming they were still in business and such and such.
Well, I mean, that's what we do. The reason, what we're saying when we say we don't accept the state form is the form is just the form. It doesn't have all that information on it. It just basically, it's an affidavit saying that I have, you know, so many hours, and they sign it and notarize it. That's it. There's nothing there to accompany that for us to vet. So the only way we can vet is if we have, you know, say, who do you work for, where do you work, how many hours? And that's what we do. The form is just not enough information for us. The form, you know, just because and like I say, it's an affidavit, it's just that whoever's signing that saying that they have those hours, well, there's no control there. Anybody could do that, and then the state will accept it.
But the form doesn't equal a card or something like that.
Right.
Okay.
Is there additional vetting that goes on at the state level beyond just that form?
Not usually, no. That's the problem. You know, Al Nagle was starting, he's retired now, but was starting to do that. You know, because I called him. We've mentioned him who are you gonna get an encounter then, basically? You know, they really didn't have a vetting process. They just fill out an affidavit, you give it to them, maybe with a letter, and they accept it. Giving you the benefit of the doubt with that, without going through the extra mile to ensure that they really truly are licensed. Or have the experience, excuse me.
Okay. And you're saying this first opportunity to be able to take this test is the first week of February?
So that's the next test.
So it's just,
Yeah, it's always,
Which is a couple, 3 weeks.
yeah, it's always, it'll be the first, February 1st.
Bet you're excited about that.
And it's just a, I mean, and then if we were to find against him and he appealed and it went to the full board, when would be the full board's ability to actually meet?
Board has a scheduled regular meeting on the 19th, and if it didn't work then, it would be the second of February.
How likely do you think it is to get everybody together
On the 19th?
on the 19th with a week's worth of notice?
Hope you find that letter. I just.
You know,
Really,
that's
just-
what I'm wanting
I
to
don't-
try and.
I don't wanna see him go through that. I mean, I don't wanna go through it either. I just, you know,
Because if you go and do appeal it to the full board, it is $500. He would get it back if he showed up, but
I got a feeling the board would not find in favor of the meeting, in my opinion.
I agree.
We have a lot of people on the board who feel like, you know, we're getting in the way of someone making a livelihood. So I don't think I'm really hoping you can find that.
or your license, or call the state, see if they have a record of your.
I don't know.
For us three right now, I think we gotta decide whether to, you know, by the letter of the law of what they've been applying, yes, I agree, he hasn't met it, and he could've tried harder. On the other side, what, the intent of this thing, the intent, if you wanna talk about intent, the intent is to make sure that a guy sits for the test has got 8,000 hours in. I think he's got 8,000 hours in. I feel like, according to the intent, I feel very good about letting him take the test. And I think that that's a second stopgap, that if he doesn't know what he's doing, he isn't gonna pass the test. It's a pretty hard test, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's not easy.
You gotta know what,
Well, I can't speak for the plumbing test, but I know a lot of sheet metal workers that haven't made it through the sheet metal test
There's a very high failure rate.
in the first go around.
so, by intent, I feel like, we have a little bit of, subcommittee, ability to look at this and agree that this isn't totally clear, it's not nailed down, there's gaps here.
I think he meets the intent of Fairground Chief, based on his previous journeyman experience.
And I have a real hard time with, you know, I do realize he was supposed to have this training card in Anchorage. I don't know if it's true or not that they turned him down for it in Anchorage since he was already a journeyman. Maybe they turned him down because he wasn't in a training program. I don't know what the details
I don't
are.
either.
Yeah, so it's just like, problems travel in twos and threes. This has about 3 problems rolling all along at the same time. But I do feel like at the end of the day, the intent of this guy having 8,000 hours in is there, and I feel like I would be inclined to let him set for the test.
I also, I appreciate that you've come to some discovery regarding the state of Alaska's process of issuing licenses. I do have a problem with it seeming a little arbitrary that you wouldn't accept the state of Alaska, but you would accept the state of Florida without having put the state of Florida through the same test.
Well, if I was able to test him, I would. It's just that, you know, it's, when there's a given or a known, you know, that the state has a record of not doing a good job.
Is there any other state,
Unlimited time and unlimited money given, you know, you
Yeah.
do
is
whatever.
there any
you
other
could.
state that you already have this opinion of?
Of what?
That
Is
if
there-
they, yeah.
Is
if
there
they
any
come-
other
comes from
state that's on the
Kentucky
no-fly list?
Or Oklahoma?
No,
Is there-
I mean, we haven't,
It's
you
just
know,
Alaska's the worst one that you've run across. As far as he said.
well, I guess maybe it's because I live here and I have a little more intimate knowledge, you know, I mean, I don't have that same intimate knowledge that I do.
Well, I went through the process to become registered in Alaska for electrician,
Yeah,
and I thought it was a logical, and it wasn't arbitrary at all. I had to prove the hours, and they were pretty, I thought they were pretty diligent on what they did.
but you came up through the IBW.
Yeah.
Right? See, I mean, really,
But-
it's somewhat apples and oranges, because once you get the letter from the union, you know.
But it doesn't even say that's acceptable here, and I didn't read this when I did it.
No,
Well, this is the plumbing. The electrical may say something different. It's been so many years ago, but
yeah, well, we don't have electrical, so, I mean, for,
I knew I needed to have 8,000 hours from something I read, and I took in my books, and they accepted it, I think.
yeah, we usually just, the union sends the letter, you know, and they break down all the hours, you know. And you know that they're not gonna send you a letter just to send you a letter.
Right, that's why I like that
They're
it's a
program.
third-party disinterested.
Whereas, and I've got no, you know, feelings that one way or the other, whether union, non-union, but just with the non-union, I mean, it's not as clear. We're not able to.
Right.
It's, you know, you get a letter from some place in Kentucky, you know, well, I'll call them up and I'll find out, see if they're even a legitimate business, and like I say, there's times when I found out they don't exist, never did exist.
But even the part about to get a trading card in Alaska, you have to have be part of a program, but in Kentucky, you may not need to be. And so, boy, it sure is arbitrary.
You know, a thought, and, you know, really this program and the licensing program does fall under the purview of the board. That's how it was originally set up many years ago. So, if you guys wanted to make a decision that, that a state, you know, card was acceptable as proof of hours, we would just honor that. And that would be what we do forward, you know, we'd give the state the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're doing a better job, I don't know. It would take a lot of that, you know.
Arbitrary stuff out, because then you'd be treating Oklahoma like Alaska.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we don't want to intentionally be arbitrary. I mean, it's just that, you know, when we know that there were actual cases where, you know, we're trying to protect the guys that really earned the card, deserved the card. I mean, you came up to trade, you did. I mean, you know, I'm here, and me too, I'm here to protect
Yep.
those kinds of guys that really earned their hours. I have no doubt in my mind that Terry's qualified and has got lots of hours. It's just that, you know, be consistent with the way we've applied our process and requirement over the years. We just need that piece of paper documentation, you know, and I think that they could probably get it, just like it may just take a little bit more effort, so.
So, sorry, were you done?
Well, and I just want some clarity from you guys of how you feel that we should move forward with this in the future. I mean, regardless of how you decide, you know, with Terry, it's gonna come up again. Am I gonna bring this to the board every time? I mean, I would rather, I mean, you don't want that, I don't want that. I just want some clear direction on what we should or should not be doing, you know, as far as our vetting process and what we accept or don't accept. I mean, I think we've done a good job in doing what we're trying to do to make sure guys have the hours. I mean, like, see, this one's kind of an exception to the norm, where clearly he's got a lot of hours, you know, he just, was he the lackadaisical on getting his license, keeping it certified? Yes, that's a given, you know, did he know better? I don't know, he says, you know, whether he did or not. He's had 10 years to kind of do it, but he's opted not to, for whatever reason, whether he was misled, you know, that he needed one or not, so. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to make certain, like you said, that these guys have the hours and that they're credible hours. I mean, just to say somebody has 8,000 hours from a remodeling company, I mean, that doesn't carry the same weight as 8,000 hours from a plumbing company, like, you know, from Bowman.
I haven't heard that before.
That's not in the bill.
No,
Is
it's
that
a
your phone?
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
phone.
Oh, okay.
It kind of
Ours
sounds
is
like
kinda
our
like
fire
We have
office.
air sirens.
So,
That's a new
I don't
one.
even know where it was now, but
Russia sent in some nuclear.
yeah. Oh, yeah, what to do, you know, how, in the future.
Well, I'm interested in, well, here's the thing, I don't wanna fly in the face of your experience with the state, with how the state vets the people that they give their license to, cause I find value in that. And I believe you when you say that. Is there something that we can do, and I think we all keep coming back to, boy, it would be really nice if you could cough up that. or your Florida card.
And you know, I'm pretty meticulous, it's just my wife plays into the picture, so.
Oh, don't.
It's in a box somewhere, right?
I'm not gonna touch that with a
Somewhere.
10-foot pole. But, could we maybe, because if we go to the point of, if we just go to the point of carte blanche accepting the hours that he's presented, then we, as a board, give anybody who comes in the door the opportunity to appeal to us, and then we end up needing a whole lot to go over this. And, you know, that also, I have a problem with that because it doesn't seem to follow a good set of rules. It's just, you know, it's three guys meeting over lunch, you know, making a decision based upon how what they feel about that particular individual. So I'm not interested in doing that. But going back to what Gary's saying, I believe that Terry has has accumulated the hours that's intended to meet the intent of what we're trying to keep from happening. Could we issue maybe a grace period based upon having a State of Alaska license with requiring additional backup? So say, could we issue him a grace period of 30 days contingent upon having a State of Alaska journeyman's card, provided that within that 30 days he provides additional evidence of experience. And in this case, that would be something like your Florida journeyman card or your or the Alaska state the letter to the state of Alaska. And because what I don't want to do is personally, I'm having a difficult time coming to any conclusion, and I don't want to find in favor of the municipality on the basis that keeps you from your livelihood. And I'm trying to find something that will allow you to continue to work, at least for a temporary period of time, while not coming up with some sort of precedent that's going to let anybody who comes through that door flash 8,000 hours in front of you guys,
Right.
and then potentially come to us as the governing body.
So you're saying such maybe, for example, if I may, just issuing him a temporary card contingent upon providing supporting documentation within a certain amount of time, which would then allow him to take the test, right? In the interim, still waiting for whether the time is beyond the test date or between now and the time that the test takes place, or sign up. If he has it before whatever is a reasonable amount of time, I guess. That would kind of the direction
That's
you're
what I
going.
was thinking. Because I would like to have the additional caveat of the temporary card being issued contingent upon taking the test, because that's the normal process
Right.
anyway. But also providing something now that, because what has become clear to me over the process of this conversation and the documentation, that there are some forms of that evidence of experience that you accept, and some forms that you do not. Now, if they can provide one that you don't maybe readily accept, but you could grace them a period to operate underneath that, like, again, under the purview of a temporary card.
Yeah.
So basically, in Terry's case, he would be granted a temporary card. He showed you his state of Alaska.
But it was expired since 2008 or something, or 7.
Okay. So your state of Alaska.
It's expired.
That was the apprenticeship card.
Oh, the apprenticeship card.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't your journeyman
So
card
your
expire?
journeyman card for the state of Alaska.
Oh, it's still
Cause
current?
I took the exam.
So you took the exam and you have a journeyman card for,
Yeah.
part that I just keep having problems with it.
Well, it's maybe because you guys are only required to be licensed in the state, not the city. I mean, that's, really, that's
That
why,
was my
because.
apprenticeship.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
and
Everybody else has to
it's,
go
it's, it's so nuanced because the plumbers are the only ones that have to do this. The sheet metal workers have a municipality card, but they don't have to have a state card.
Right,
So,
yeah, and I don't know that.
and the
you know,
electricians have to have a state card, but don't have to have a municipal.
And I don't know the
card.
whole
So-
derivation or the history behind all that either. I mean, it's just-
And we're all MEP. I mean, so that's where I'm going. And based upon you giving me back what I said, yes, that's what I'm proposing.
Okay. So is the test more about, because I mean, it sounds to me like we want to make sure we have the test here in Anchorage to ensure that the people working here know the amendments. It's not coming in here.
That's one of the main, you know, reasons, yeah.
So-
I mean, the eye
I'm
test-
not buying that, because, I'll tell you why.
I got a feeling I know.
I don't think the whole country uses the same plumbing code. Some are international plumbing code, right, or some,
Yeah, the IPC and
Yeah.
the FPC.
you didn't say anything that it mattered, if you were coming from a state that was doing a total different plumbing code.
Maybe we ought to
On
add
base.
that.
On base as the IPC.
Yeah, okay, on base, so you're in a different place and have a totally different code, and it doesn't say in here, oh, well, these states are this code, and we don't allow that experience because it isn't the same code. So that seems like a big gap. So if you're just worried about the amendments, and I know we bridged the gap with the amendments on the electrical side, and we have a ton of amendments electrically.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, probably every bit as much as your plumbing ever dreamed to have, and I'm gonna guess. So I don't buy that that's the reason why. I think you guys had a couple of squirrels come through and you didn't like that, you felt like they weren't up to snuff or whatever, and
I don't know, it's just the city's required plumbing licenses back when my dad was in the trade, you know. So, I mean, it goes way back, and like I say, I don't know the whole history of how it came about. You know, there used to be a plumbing board, most likely they're the ones that, you know, and the plumbing, that started it for whatever reason.
well, if it started back then, that long ago, I would say maybe it's time to review it, and maybe it is time to not have that anymore, and just streamline the system like the electricals do, that you have one system.
But, you know, we try to do what we feel the community wants, and the community at the time, when we polled it, wanted to maintain licensing in the city, so we
And-
did entertain that.
And again, how long ago was that poll?
That was somewhere around 2008, maybe?
So, I mean,
Not-
maybe reasonably recent enough.
Yeah.
It would be beneficial, I mean, within our licensure, there's also comedy in your ability to be somebody who is a journeyman up in Fairbanks and be able to come down here and without being turf-based. I mean, that's kind of the light underbelly of the test in Anchorage is these are our jobs in Anchorage. But the ability as Alaskans to have comedy, and as I'm surprised that you go where the work is.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the contractors wanted that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Doesn't make sense.
overwhelmingly, to be honest. I mean, I think there was
It
one
the
person. that-
Contractor owners whose livelihood is based in Anchorage.
They maybe didn't want competition coming from the valley or something. I don't know what the deal was, but there's something here I don't understand on that.
Yeah.
Off the topic, but
Yeah.
what do you think? I think we should, on the, you're inclined to vote no right now, correct?
Or in favor of,
The municipality.
or,
Yes.
Because you feel like this is gonna open, and I think it's a valid point. That
Yes.
it could open up the gates that this gets out and everybody says, yeah, you just appeal it to the building board and they're
You
nice
know,
guys. and
with-
business loves it.
With that, well, and, you know, and where does that break down? Because, I mean, who's to say that the next the next plumber who comes through the door trying to do this isn't somebody I know? And how quickly does that, because, I mean, Anchorage is a tight-knit community, everybody knows everybody, and how quickly does that rotate all the building board members before you have somebody trying to do this that can't even sit with the board because of personal conflicts? So, yeah, I am in favor of finding with the municipality, but I would really
like it in this particular case, and I would really like to find a way to give Terry every opportunity to continue working.
Yes, that goes without saying. Yes.
Where's the verbiage on the temporary license?
I don't, is it in this section? that you
I
see?
remember reading it in the last
Packet?
hour and a half.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot
It
of,
was, it wasn't one of the
Seems
highlighted
like it's at the
ones.
bottom of one of the pages. Let's see.
I'm just.
It shall be
Maybe it was
unlawful
on
to
the-
labor as
it
a
was
plumber or
on-
sheet metal trainee without first
It was on.
issued a valid trainee certificate of qualification by the municipality.
There it is,
One-
number 10
Well,
on the handout.
number 10 on the handout.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Temporary work permits will only be given one time to applicants taking the journeyman exam and must be for the next available exam. No temporary work permit issued for a contract category.
And just,
Has Mr. Wise been ever issued a temporary work permit?
I don't think so, no.
So could he receive his temporary work permit under number 10?
Well, that's up to you guys. Based on what our process, no, because he hasn't proven his hours yet.
Well,
It's
but
only-
but he was found to be not in compliance. He's trying to become in compliance.
Right,
That's why it was waived.
right.
He's still in the process of getting his paperwork to you to show compliance.
Yeah, but the temporary permit is only given after you've received proof of hours, and
Oh.
you're just waiting till the next test comes, because it could be, you know, it's only every other month, so. That way we get them to work, we give them the benefit of the doubt that they're gonna pass the test, okay? If a person does not pass the test, that temporary permit is null and void. It goes away. So that was one of the next questions, I mean, what if, and I mean, you know, you prove this, and then what if, you know, Terry doesn't pass the test, now what do we do? You know, he's no longer a journeyman. Give him an apprentice card? Is that acceptable? I mean, that would make him legal. Would his employer, you know, give him the same credit for that as a, you know, journeyman? I don't know. Ralph's a reasonable guy, he probably would, he's gonna probably do whatever he can to help you out, that's my experience of Ralph, I mean, you know, so, if you had an apprentice card, you know, as long as you're not working by yourself, is that realistic? I mean, I don't know.
No, I work by myself all
Yeah.
the time.
But,
So,
but I mean, had this been a different scenario where somebody had the information,
right,
said, yep, oh, my bad, I just moved in, didn't realize it, I've got my union card, I gotta get it from Illinois. Would you have issued them a temporary, or are they basically out of work until they
no,
can
no,
get it?
we give him a temporary permit
Okay.
until the next test is taken.
Yeah.
Once he takes the test, if they fail the test, that temporary work permit is no longer valid. So then they can't work as a journeyman until they pass the test. So their only option at that point is to get a trainee card and work as a trainee.
You can't get a trainee card unless you're enrolled in a,
Well,
per
that's
program.
that's a state law, yeah. You know, I with you, Eric, kinda, I know what you're saying, if I know that they were like a journeyman, that haven't, they've already proven their hours, there's no reason for them to be, even though it's not in writing, we have given trainee cards just so we can, for the reason to let the guys work, so we're not keeping them from their livelihood. I don't wanna do that. So that, whether it's not in writing, but at least it's a vehicle for us to use to allow them to go to work. Now, they do have to, you know, follow the rules of a trainee, they can't work by themselves. But at least that gives them, be able to work until the next test. You know, they gives them time to study and hopefully pass the next time and get there, you know. And we could, you know, do something similar with Terry. I mean, you know, if you know, your direction, because that's what I need, you know.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm wondering is, had we not even met, you found him on the job site, didn't have his card, he said, oh, sorry, my bad, I'm trying to get in compliance.
Right.
Had at that point in time, he'd been given, okay, all right, give us the paperwork, which we've identified what that paperwork is, you would have given him a temporary card
No,
until he could,
we don't give the temporary card
until he's given his
until
paperwork.
after the paperwork has been proven,
Alright,
hours been proven,
That's the part I'm,
which allows them to work until the next test is given.
all right, so.
what about a special dispensation that we allow a temporary card? Is there a vehicle we could do that we could give them a temporary journeyman's card until the next test and the hours are verified? Just to not undermine everything, does that make sense? You know, just
So, you know, based on contingent on that he provides documentation of hours.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're looking for opinions, my opinion is that's reasonable.
Is that with
That
an
only gives
authority
them, I don't
to
know.
provide?
I'm
Well,
not
that
sure.
was
We
more
don't
or less
know
what
what-
I was talking about
Yeah, that's,
before.
I don't
Yeah.
know if the only thing we can do is thumbs up, thumbs down, that's
Yeah, I
it.
think that,
We can
you know.
do provisions, be able to say, yes, pending this.
Well,
But I think that I could probably do that. You know, you guys might not have the authority, but I could look at that big picture and say that's a reasonable solution myself,
Okay.
okay? I mean, and
Because I,
You can't order us to do it, but you could recommend and suggest that such things happen.
I mean, I'm gonna do anything I can do to help, you know, him get through this. I mean, let's say I do this all the time, try to help guys get through it. I go out of my way to, I make the calls to help get hours sometimes for them, you know, when I can. But, you know, just, I know the importance of work and providing a family.
I feel like that's
Everyone
where
would need
we're
that.
all right now. is
Yeah,
trying to
but it's important
find something.
too, even though I bring emotion to my job a lot, probably more than a lot of people do, because I'm a caring person, but, you know, but at the end of the day, we have to look at what, you know, our process is, be consistent, and apply it, and try to keep some of that out of it, you know. I'll go out of my way to help, you know, but I can't just, because I feel like empathy or sympathetic, or, you know, I can't base my decisions on feelings when I have, you know, guidelines to follow. But I don't think it would be unreasonable to give him a temporary work permit until the next test. If he does not pass the test, then his only options would be, we could give him a trainee card, but he would have to follow the rules of the trainee. So if you're out working by yourself and you get stopped by an inspector, whomever, you know, most likely, I can't speak for the building official, but most likely you would be fine. Because you've already had one wave, they waived it the first time. Yeah, so you.
Took you
definitely-
guys 10 years to catch him this time.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of truth to that story, and I, you know, there's guys out there that, on big commercial jobs, and a union guy too, that was running a big job at Providence, always running work, always a foreman. I'm given a test, and he's in taking the test, and I said, what are you doing here? He says, well, I'm here to take my test, get my journeyman license. He had never even had an apprentice card. We just assumed, because he's always been running work, he just assumed that he was licensed. He'd never been carded. Plus, he was the son of a whole family of guys that were, you know, in the trade. So there was an assumption there. Yeah. So you're right. There's a lot of truth to that. It took 10 years, and you know, we know that Terry's here. He just wants to get everything in order and keep it in order, and we're going to do whatever we can to help him do that, just within the constraints of what I feel that we cannot do.
We're looking to you, Craig.
Looking to
Work
me.
up some magic language about, we recommend,
Recommend a temp permit be issued for use until the next test. Now, then the next question is how, okay, so we find in favor of the muni. However, we recommend that a temporary work permit be issued until the next test, to allow Mr. Wise to submit paperwork that meets
I would say
the 4 years.
additional contingency requires that Mr. Wise provide additional verification of, what's the language of
The 8,000 hours in 4
Oh,
years.
it says, but it's,
Of 8,000 hours or 4 years prior to his work in Anchorage?
well, it doesn't have to be his work prior to, it doesn't
He's
have
got
to be
those
prior
two
to
for
Anchorage.
March.
He still has potentially 2 for Partouche.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be, I wouldn't put that stipulation in there. I would say, what is it called?
He's already submitted hours that meet the 8,000.
Just proof of 8,000 hours that are.
But what do they
Yeah,
call it?
he's submitted proof
Evidence of experience. That's it.
Lawfully That's what we're coming back to, you
Not
know.
all of them.
Evidence of experience. I think that's the language that we find in the code, it's called evidence of experience, which is defined as the 8,000 hours or 4 years.
Yeah, but the problem is he submitted this piece of paper that shows almost 16,000 hours of evidence of experience. But we're saying that they're unlawful.
I don't know how to wordsmith that. I'm unsure how to wordsmith that.
Even those hours, not all of them are in Anchorage. I mean, we do work in Wasilla, Palmer, Eagle River, and beyond, and
Would
even
you-
down to Girdwood.
So that sure smells like a gap in the system.
I mean, I
That just, if the guy would have been working for these guys in Wasilla, it would all count, everything we'd
Yeah,
be
I
done.
agree. I agree.
It just doesn't seem like a good, what, is your position at the municipality just to manage this, program?
Oh, no, I'm the chief plumbing inspector.
You're chief plumbing inspector, okay,
I just inherited this.
yeah.
I get paid
I
extra for
honestly
it.
think, my personal opinion is, I think it ought to be looked at being scrapped and moved to the method that's used by the electrical department. I think it's redundant, and I think it's a problem for these contractors to move their employees from, and I bet you they're ignoring it anyway. I think this is a redundant level of bureaucratic mess, and I'm a very liberal person, but I feel like this is not a beneficial program, and I unless the test is so much harder and so much more than the state's test, which you're saying is a totally different test,
Oh, yeah.
totally different test.
Totally. Yeah, states, you know, have 50% open book, 50% closed book, all multiple guests.
And who writes the test for the city?
The, Pete Jurzak, he's a state inspector out of Sitka, is the one that does it, and then they all get together and kind of go over it, but he does the
So it's
draft.
just one, just for the city of Anchorage. We have a test just for the city of Anchorage.
Right. Yeah.
Pete writes Anchorage's test?
No,
No, no,
oh, no,
no,
oh, Anchorage, no, I write the test. I mean, I inherited the test, and I just keep it updated to current code. It's the same test I took back in the early 80s. I mean, the same, I mean, as far as the, you know, there's 100 questions, general plumbing questions. There's 50 gas venting questions. There's a gas pipe sizing drawing that you have to size it. There's a water pipe sizing drawing, and then there's a 3-story plan view building where you have to pipe all the fixtures, you know, legally. I mean, it's harder than the state's test. It's much, you know, it's better. It's a better test. It'll that drawing alone will tell you whether or not these guys know what they do. And like you said, you're an electrician. You think you can pass the plumbing test because you did a little plumbing. You know, there are guys.
I was being facetious.
No, but you know,
And-
there are people that are very book smart. Okay, and they can read a code and they can pass a test.
That's what I was getting at.
Then they go,
is that-
these guys, they might get like 90 on their general questions, then they do that drawing, and they get 20. I mean, because that tells me more that they know what they're doing than answering those questions, that they know actually how to put the pipe in. So, I mean,
Is it normal that cities will have a separate, I mean, like Los Angeles? or-
it's all over the board. I mean, you know, I've been, like you mentioned, I've been on the national ATMO, and there's some do, some don't, you know. I mean, some are just state run. I don't know what the numbers are, to be honest.
Okay, well, that's off the subject. but anyway. Did you come up with the language?
Okay, so how about this? We recommend the MOA issue a temporary work permit for Mr. Wise until the next test, contingent that Mr. Wise submit verification of evidence of experience outside of the MOA or under an active apprentice card. Because then that would allow the part 2 years to be submitted. And then also, if you can find the Florida experience, that would also,
Or if you could even break that out to the work that,
and also outside the
I
municipality.
just suggest that too, to see if they have, you know,
I don't know if that's even possible.
yeah.
I mean,
You only
that's
need to get
7
another
years.
4,000 outside of your part 2 shower, you only need another 4,000 out of the 16.
No, actually, Pertouche would be 2,000 roughly.
2 years.
And so he only needs 2 more, oh yeah, 4,000 hours, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking years, not hours.
Or the whole Ford thing, which is 4 years. Which would also, so we did that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm inclined to
okay.
say that's a,
I'll write something down for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're favoring the side of the municipality, but you're
You're recommending it to.
recommending, you know,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that in
Yeah.
favor of the muni, but with that recommendation?
and the only reason I'm not siding completely against the muni is I don't want to open up the gates so that he's going to be fighting this all the time. I would as a recommendation, I would clean this up, and I would strongly consider this Anchorage licensing thing is what I would recommend. I think if that was brought to light and described it to the whole building board, I think they would eat you alive in there. That building board's mean. They don't like you. They don't like you guys. So
I got Don McCann, no.
yeah,
John Edwards.
yeah. Those plumber guys would probably be all.
Well, John, you know, used to be a licensed plumbing
Yeah.
contractor.
But I think the rest of the board would probably be, they're against additional layers of bureaucracy that they don't think is.
I know there are a lot of people that are, but like I say, we as a municipality, when this came to light, we opened it up to everybody to come. We had a big meeting here, and it was, it was,
Okay. And maybe there's a
Overwhelmingly.
part I don't understand, but I know the electricians are really picky about everything. They're really thorough, and they don't need that, and it makes me wonder why.
yeah.
Especially as strong as the IBEW is in Anchorage.
Yeah.
Why they don't have that requirement is a big question mark in my brain.
It is weird that those two are not tracking along the exact same route.
Yeah.
Because plumbers and electricians are of the same mindset.
No, they're-
I got stories I can
Not the
tell
ones
you.
I work with.
So, but even bringing this up, taking this to the next level of, who would even, I don't think the board has the authority to get rid of the Anchorage dam. That's regs.
Well, yeah, that's the assembly. The ordinance would have to be, the board could probably work with the assembly person to,
We could make a recommendation.
We can make a recommendation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, the residential housing guys are better at that. Getting things to the assembly. Another subject.
Just one other thing. When was the last time you really found that disparity between the state of Alaska's vetting process and your own? When was the last time that really came to head?
Well, I haven't really had to because
Because
the people provide the letters, and then if they have their letters, there's no reason for me to. What happens is when I looked at one of them where this guy's letter was his father signed it for his company, it wasn't a plumbing company. That's what alerted me. Okay, so typically though, people provide the documentation we request, and it's not very often that I'm going to have to go vet it any further.
And at the state level, you're saying that letter probably would have just slipped on by. They wouldn't.
Well, it did.
It did.
Because he had a state license, and that's all he had for documentation. They're just giving you the benefit of the doubt that you're being honest, and that's why it's an affidavit. It's an actual affidavit that you sign. So if they found that you were lying, then they would probably take it to court. But it's not typically, that's not going to happen. The state's pretty, they're very lackadaisical when it comes to enforcement for that. For the most part. Well, and they can't do it because they don't have the staffing. Kind of like to film like Texas, they have 4 inspectors for the whole state of Texas. Well, we've got 4 inspectors for the whole state of Alaska. So there's no way they can cover it. I think we do a good job here, and we maintain good integrity, in the municipality, and we're doing our job of protecting the public by having licenses, by having inspections, by having classification. Work, designed by professionals.
Alright, so, like that saying, we find in favor of blank?
I
and we
will
all
draft
sign
it up once you
Okay.
give me your wording, and I will email it out to you and so that everyone can make sure it's correct, and then sign it and send it back to me. And then I'll send it to Mr. Wise and post it on the website.
Do we need to do the telephone thing where one of us signs it and we send it out to the other person signs it, and then, so you end up getting 3 signatures on a piece of paper?
One piece of paper.
One piece of paper. Okay, got it. I guess that probably.
And as
how the
Mr.
else
Bowman
are.
tried to do, electronic is not recommended because it doesn't come through if somebody else sees it. They may not have the same
Oh, yeah.
upgraded software.
Once they sign it, it violates the signature requirement.
So you're prepared for the test? Have you been studying? Are you ready for
I
it?
haven't been studying, but I will hit the books immediately.
Oh, you had a couple weeks there.
Yeah.
That's a lot of information. I mean, it really is.
Well, I mean, I've been in the trade,
Yeah.
long enough. I'm familiar with standard practices, and Florida is on another code. It's on the Southeast Standard.
Well, they have their own code, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, but
plumbing code.
it's not.
That's
that
what's weird
different.
about how this is working.
It's
I
got,
couldn't pass the PE exam today, though.
But, you know, it's not really necessarily based on code, it's based on hours of experience, you know. And when you were asking about why Anchorage, and that was my opinion, is one of the, you know, trying to figure out what is one of the reasons, or what's one of the advantages, I guess, is more the answer. I believe there is somewhat of an advantage to having them be familiar with all the local amendments, you know.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Because of our climatic, you know, nature,
But somehow electrically they're solving it.
yeah.
And I don't know exactly what the difference is between the plumbing and the
Well, the water
electrical.
freezes.
Yeah.
Electric kills you.
Electrical is,
Cross connections kill you
Starts
too.
fires.
I think 110 in here is same as 110 in California,
Yeah.
is it?
I guess.
So formalize it.
Formalize it. We do a vote, call for a vote? Okay, so, I need a motion, actually.
The person that does the motion has to word it.
And the chair is not allowed
Allowed
to
to do
The
motion.
chair is not allowed to do that.
I'll try to read your writing. I make a motion that we recommend the MOA provide a temporary work permit to be issued until the next test is administered. Contingent that Mr. Weiss submit verification of evidence
Of experience.
of experience outside of MOA or under an active apprentice card.
And they'll be fine in favor of.
Well, second motion.
Okay. But we need to find in favor of somebody as part of that.
Find in favor of the MOA.
That's what you can say in the front of the motion.
Oh, I should have said that.
Friendly amendment to put that in the front.
Okay, provide friendly amendment, put that in the front. Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Good job.
All right. Now I will write up an email. and send that to you.
Thank you.
And the rest, so where does he go for the state of Alaska? Where's that address?
No, I don't have that, it's up, they moved.
You said.
It's
Muldoon.
over in Muldoon.
Muldoon.
It's that old
Department of Labor.
shopping center, right when you,
right at the end of the bar.
Oh, where they
yeah,
got,
yeah,
close to, by where the bowling alley was?
Yeah.
East 40?
yeah, exactly.
What's in there? Okay.
Yeah, and some that go in the main entrance and go left.
I haven't been over there since they moved from Eagle.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, yes, please. Let us all sleep at night knowing that you're still being able to provide money for your family.
Appreciate it.
Didn't ruin someone's. Well, at least it wasn't prior to Christmas. It ruined your Christmas. All right.
I make a motion to adjourn?
Thank you.
Second the motion.